Now we bring you the special news, as we do each week on the New Intelligence program. The news that is special in that the news does not whine, complain, preach, try to make you feel bad, deal in personal anecdotes, or interview idiots. So, now we bring you the news. And a viewer recently wrote about my use of the word we. And I said we, I wanted to know if I was using the royal we, or was there more than one of me? Now the news. Everyone who hears about there being a secret loves the idea that someone knows what it is. Either that or hates it. There was once a bat who lived by radar. A man captured him and ate him. Just the upper part. Do you mean the upper part of the bat or the man? Precisely. And from a viewer, this facts. Since you said that now is not forever, then when is it? Please reply before Thursday, as I have an important meeting scheduled. The preacher shouted to the crowd, "What is worse than greed?" And they shouted back, "Inattentiveness." He then cried, "What is worse than envy?" And they shouted back, "Inattentiveness." He then bellowed, "What is worse than pride?" And they shouted back, "Inattentiveness." So he tried, "What is even worse than sin itself?" And again they shouted back, "Inattentiveness." And he turned to his assistant and whispered, "Where the hell are we anyway?" One man always wore a coordinated outfit, his mind and his thoughts. Why don't mystics ever come in out of the rain? Because they'd shrink. One man told the police that he didn't remember regarding the matter under investigation. But they didn't believe him. But it was true. He couldn't remember anything about anything. Science and sequence and logic. Men invented the number systems after the alphabet began to confuse them. Without his glasses, one man could see little. Without his thoughts, nothing. Every ordinary person who wants to improve themselves is a kind of low-level mystical warrior, which again shows the need for more than ordinary effort. The man told the head doctor, "I get dazed and confused," and the expert, getting a good gander of what was in there, replied, "Well, it's no wonder." And a viewer quickly faxed us, at first asking where he could find such a physician, but then said, never mind, that he decided he didn't really want to get into all this. Besides, he said he probably already knew where he could locate such a person. Beauty and birds. Crows who never see themselves don't give a damn. Thoughts equal reality. Clarified consciousness equals real reality. Veracity verified. One man found a special message someone had left. Well, not actually left by someone, but a special message all the same. Investments. First voice said, "Put your mouth where your money is." Second replied, "You mean on the wager I favor or in my pocket?" Precisely. Value. Everyone's thoughts are worth just as much as everyone else's. Our subject tomorrow will be bargains. Redemptive religion. Consciousness died for your sins. Well, at least it's trying to. One man said, "I feel much better since I quit taking drugs," and was asked which drugs, and replied, "The ones my mind used to lay on me."
Yeah.
All rituals ultimately distract from the goal for which their practice was initially conceived. Question: what's worse than living in a daze? Discovering that you don't have to and still doing it.
Yeah.
Is worse really the operative word here? No, but it was the worst one I could think of at the moment.
Yeah.
And another viewer recently wrote, I just remembered, and asked if a constant state of enlightenment would disable one. Well, let's go on. A certain occultist was fond of saying, "The dead can see things we can't," and an assistant thought, "Hell, so can the living." Definition: the past, a synonym for non-physical indigestion. A man wondered, does seeing the brilliance of Istanbul ruin Paris for you? And was glad he didn't know the answer. The soul of the city sings, "I be hip, I be cool, I don't be nobody's fool," which is true, for there is no spotting of yellow like canaries in a lemon storm. A man pondered, if my thoughts weren't packed together so close, I might have room to breathe. But then again, sir, if your breaths weren't jammed so tight, you might have more room to think. What the ordinary dislikes so much about the stick of non-ordinary ideas is that it can be grabbed from either end and turned this way and that. One guy asked another guy, "Are you an enlightened master?" And the second guy replied, "Yeah, except when my batteries are run down." And since they'd just been discussing the control of attention, the first guy understood exactly what was meant. Weakness. The weaker he got, the weaker he became. One man had binoculars, which made things seem far away or up close. It did this by talking to him. Ordinary. To be ordinary is to listen. The difference between dreamers and knights truly on a charge is that dreamers must have drugs in their drugs. Bunions and blisters. If you don't dance with your thoughts, they can't step on your feet. Buildings and construction. The foreman yelled up to the crane operator, "A little higher." One man could stand in a particular place and feel unusually good, but as soon as he'd forget about it, he'd move. A little higher. Beneath the surface flows a stream whose existence has caused men to conceive of underworlds, spirit worlds, subconscious worlds, and the like. But that's not what the stream is. There's a special train that runs toward Turkey, but to get on it, you've got to really get on it and stay there. Proverb correction. City jockeys will only ride a dead horse. The dirty little secret. Anyone can be more clearly conscious right this moment by just trying to be. Question: which is this the most? Dirty, a secret, or little? One man liked to hear what other people were thinking. It cut down on him having to. Written in the dust under a bed in a monastery were these words: the only good mystic is a deaf mystic. Followed by another message: the only better mystic is a mute one. One man had a balloon which he blew up so big that it disappeared. The failure to spot yellow by canaries in a lemon storm. It started out to be about green and lizards and a lime storm. Would that have made any difference? Now we're still talking about that great sacred other world. Which one's that? That was off the record. One man's car would periodically stall. He took it to be his fault. If he was a knight, he'd be correct. Recognition and comprehension. One man cooked only for himself. That's all he could do, because he'd eat it all as fast as it was finished. One man had two houses, one in the city and one in the country. I know that many people do, but his were unusual. Wife wears a skirt and walks upstairs and stands on high places, at least for a mystic. One man, when he got out of bed, was already ahead, because, you see, he'd get up alone. Then there was another man who, immediately upon awakening each morning, would say, "Now, what were we talking about?" and proceed to ignore it. Dating. One man went steady with himself. That is, when he was really with himself, he'd be exceptionally steady in a certain respect. Is it not interesting that it is the mind that initially attracts one toward the mystical path, yet is also what tells one that this ain't it? There is a planet at the edge of this galaxy whereon all morals to stories are produced. But it blew up several thousand years ago. If you talk about the same thing long enough, you'll begin to think it's important. One man finally distilled and condensed the whole message into 7 pithy and poignant words. You're only conscious when you're not thinking. His success in spreading this has only been matched by his listeners' immediate thinking about it. Theology. There is a special place of hellish torment awaiting those mystics who take irony seriously. The opera. The fat lady is afraid that if she ever quits singing, she might die, or disappear, or lose her role, or maybe go insane. And finally, if consciousness was a rat hole, thoughts would be a 40-ton rat. The news item that said all rituals ultimately distract from that which they were initially conceived of to pursue. I mangled my own quote. Rituals will ultimately distract from that for which they were initially conceived. We'll make it. This is much wider than I've mentioned in the past, and it has to do with the thought processes. But since it is almost impossible at any beneficial speed in real time to try and discuss thoughts from one person to another, to directly discuss it, because if it was easily manageable into a profitable form, you would already be doing it to your frigging selves. Mm-hmm. So we look outside and find examples. Cheap, pretentious, plastic, made offshore as they may be. Remember, we're still talking about thoughts, because that is the ultimate ritual to consciousness. But since you can't stare at it directly, as I just said, I was going to point out some of the examples that people never consider. Not only the examples, but they do not consider how it happens. How about a full menu? Rituals, religious, patriotic, paternal. Now, somewhere in there, you will find every civilized human engaged either in physically ritualistic activity, or they will be a verbal supporter of it if questioned. But it's very common, most common, for it to be a physical reality, at least at specified times in their life. All of the activities that men do that are far removed, or better put, the further they are removed from survival activities, planting crops, hunting animals, the further the activity is removed from that, which almost everyone hearing this, your activity is real removed. Your hunting and fishing and corn gathering is done in an office, fooling around with computers or books. Although it is the same thing, but it's now become a different kind of second stage activity, that you're working for money rather than actual food or actual place to stay. So anything, the further you are removed from that, from those kinds of activities, that we're now talking about almost all of the civilized world, everything you do in your spare time, your free time after you punch the clock, after that, everyone would fall into one of those categories, that they engage in one or more: religious activity, political activity or interest, or fraternal activity and or interest. And each one requires that one engage in ritualistic behavior. And I say it requires. They may tell you initially, if you joined a new religion, that they may tell you that you had to engage in certain ritualistic activity. But you make a mistake to believe that it was their motivation, that their demand that brought it on. Contraire, if they did not make such a demand, you would lose interest in it. Mm-hmm. The activity, the organization would not survive. We've been through this several times and sort of semi-oblique approaches to it. Not only religion, you could not have any religion without some sort of ritualistic. And if you'll notice, the world's more popular religions have more ritualistic behavior than the less popular ones. Mm-hmm. The difference between, let us say, that guy in Rome with that big church and those billions of followers. The kinds of ritualistic behavior, you have to go to school to study it, the difference between him and some guy down in Mississippi tonight, sawdust on the ground and a tent out of the back of a pickup truck, his wife playing the tambourine. You understand, the simpler it is. And it's makeshift. He's like an itinerant troubadour, a minstrel going around, and he has to put up a few signs or sends his son-in-law into town 2 or 3 days before, taking up signs on telephone poles that Reverend so-and-so will be here for a good old foot-stomping, tear-jerking, snake-handling revival next Saturday out at such and such out in Jones's Field. You do know that such a man is going to have a very limited flock, if any, permanent. And he will also have very limited rituals. In fact, about the only ritual he has is, give us some money and don't drink while I'm talking. Not to where the women and children can see it. But even beyond that, he may finally settle down, as you should know, and develop some sort of following, or get too old, or he loses his license and he can't drive around anymore. And so he buys a little building somewhere and he sets up a church and ends up with a permanent flock of some kind. The smaller it is, the smaller is the intrigue, he just barely holds on, the less is he going to have any ritualistic activity demanded of the people. The more successful it is, and none of it causes anything, I'm just describing life, remember. But the more successful, the more participants you have involved with any of these activities, religious, political, or fraternal, the more there's going to be some sort of ritualistic behavior. And it's not just religion, that's one I've always used, but how about they'll start a new political party. There's always attempting to start one in every country. And here we are in Albania, and you know how often we have tried. I'm saying we, now using your royal pejorative. Well, don't you Albanians write me. You don't know how to speak English anyway, so don't try and correct my use of... Getting off the subject, but if you notice, every country ends up being controlled by alternating two central powers, political powers. That's all it can take. That's all that's needed. You only got two sides of your brains. The only thing that the people know is yes or no. That's all you need is Democrats, Republicans, Royalists, Troys, Whigs, Figs, Newtons. All you need is two parties. But as you know, there's always somebody trying to start a third party. And if you'll notice the difference, and it may first not strike you as the same, and the intensity and the complexity of a political party is not the same as most people's involvement in religion, because you might attend a political function only a dozen times a year, whereas very religious people do it publicly perhaps once or twice a week, and they may be involved with a ritualistic behavior in the privacy of their own home. But at any rate, at least if you're going to join up with the Democratic or Republican Party, one of the major parties, you at least have got to show up at headquarters probably, sign some sort of pledge. At least all you do is say that you will support the general philosophy of the party, and that you will do what you can to support the candidates, and that you will be an active supporter of their platform in general elections, and etc. And they'll give you a little card and give you a pen, and they will assess you membership dues, which is ritualistic behavior. In case you hadn't noticed, you laughed at my itinerant preacher saying when I said that his only ritual is give me money. That's a ritual. You all laughed. I knew you would. But think about the small crowd that kind of guy I described out in the wilds of Mississippi, out in a little beat-up tent, just him and his wife and his son-in-law. They're trying to run a service. Think about this. If he didn't ask for money, he wouldn't even have the few people that show up. I'm going to give you a second. We got a few seconds. Think about that. So you laugh the other way, like, yeah, old greedy preachers always, that's the only reason he's there, asking for money. Hey, you can say that. Who cares? That is, who cares if you say that? And you can say, well, that's all it is. He's not a preacher. He's not trying to help anybody. You say that that's his only ritual. Yeah, hell yeah, because that's all he's up to. But think about it. The few people that show up, if in a year's time of him traveling all out in rural areas, if he averages for each meeting, let's say, attracting 10 people that will sit there throughout the service, and if they will sit there, the people that come there, all of them I can almost guarantee that all 10 of them, or whatever number, will contribute something. When his wife goes out there and holds out the tambourine, everybody will put in something. They planned to. They knew they would be asked, and they knew they were going to. And then he leaves, and they forget about it. If he didn't even ask for money, I don't even want to describe what it would be like. That's why I was going to give you a moment to think about it. So I waited and let you, after you laughed at my fictitious preacher only having one ritual of asking for money, and many of you went, ha, ha, ha. No. That's the only thing that held that tent together. I don't mean for his sake. That's the only reason people stayed there. Think about ordinary people. Showed up. Tent preacher. They know exactly what it is. They've been there. They see it. And they go in. They try to play a little music on a guitar and one tambourine as best they can, stomp their feet and hoop and holler and try to work the crowd up and holler, boy, it's great to be back in Mississippi. At least they know that. Them and all cheap comedians. Anybody else here from Mississippi? Yay! God, what a great state. What a great state. At least you got him going. If it went on through the service, and he gave a few testimonials about where he had been, how many souls he'd saved, and all the good work he's been doing, plus all the problems, how many flat tires he's had, and he's about to blow a rod out there in the old truck. And he went through all that, and everybody's waiting, and he says, well, and my wife will sing one more, so she sings one more, and he says, well, she always, even though I've been with a woman for 40 years, it makes me feel good every time she sings. It touches my heart, and everybody, yeah. So he pulls out the Bible and says, well, now it's about time for me to bring you the word of the Lord. And he goes on and never asks for money. Like I said, I hate to tell you, I hate to say, boy, such and such would happen. We're beginning to reach areas I keep trying to push you people into where I don't really want to say anything. But see, you laughed, as most people would, or scoffed, about the fact that I point out that those kinds of people with a limited following, not that one causes the other, but it's the way it works together. The more limited is the interest in what they're doing, the fewer will be their rituals. And I point out that he's got no rituals. For one thing, he can't. He's just passing through. Well, of course, he could. He could adopt them from others. He could ask, he could say, well, all you people, I don't know what religions, what denominations you are when I'm not in town, but I would appreciate it that if we would all, before you get out of your seat again, if you would all, maybe he tries to steal something he saw in a movie from a Catholic church, and would everybody bow on one knee and just kind of do this? Imagine you're drawing a cross. So they wouldn't think he was an undercover Catholic in Mississippi. I mean, you can get hung for that. And he said, just draw a cross on you and, say the word Jesus. He could do that. But if he didn't do anything, the money would be the one ritual, the request for money to help me keep doing the Lord's work. If they sit there, and everybody knows, that's been around knows, you ask for the money. I messed up the schedule because you ask for money, really, before his wife sings, the final, the biggest, foot stomping music to try to work up the crowd. But everybody expected when he said, all right, I'm going to have my dear wife sing one more song. It's one you really like, and we can all sing along. Don't feel bad. Clap your hands and praise the Lord as you're reaching in your pocketbook, because you know it takes money. The Lord will bless you for helping me spread the word. And so while she sings, my son-in-law is going to come out there with the extra tambourine, and would you help us out? Everybody's waiting on that. But he says, now before my message, which is always the closing thing, that's the closing part of the act. He says, now my wife's going to sing a song, one that's really going to enthuse you and put the Spirit of the Lord in you, and then I'll do my message. And everybody's waiting, reaching, for him to say, and we'll be passing around the plate or a bucket for some money. And he doesn't say a word. He says, go ahead, hon, sing it. And she takes off. So all of you who laughed, which I expected, that's why I set it up, was a kind of criticism of life. But here is a great example, possibility of you seeing it for yourself, the difference between a criticism of life and a description of life. Except we've reached a place I'm not even going to describe if he didn't do that. The one measly ritual at which you scoffed earlier and laughed and ridiculed, without that, try to start a third religious political party, and there would be almost no rituals whatsoever. The guy sticks up some signs on telephone poles and say, we're going to start the blue and red party in support of modern day life and saving everyone's good health and doing good work. Call such and such number and ask for Fred. And people call up and they say, well, what is this new party? And you say, well, we're in favor of, we don't want any more wars, we don't want the government taking all of our money, and we don't want large businesses poisoning the environment and hurting us. And the guy on the phone says, well, that sounds good to me. That's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. And he said, well, what does it take to join? And Fred says, well, hell, just give me your number. I'm trying to work it before they let me speak down at the mall. If I bring down my own bullhorn, I was trying to work it out with them to let me come down there and hold a little rally. How about show up or give me your number and I'll call you back and tell you that when I'm going to go out and do something or help me hand out handbills, flyers and stuff. It's just, so you'd normally look at it as one thing causes another, or there's not enough organization or not enough people. It's not that. Yeah. I keep trying to sketch for you life out there, and I'm really making no comment about it, other than I have to describe it. And ordinary minds go, oh, I know what you're actually saying. You're trying to go, I'm trying to describe it, and your mind won't hear it. One does not cause the other. There is no sequence. It just, but this third party will have almost no, you might call it requirements, but I'm calling it tonight rituals, which is the same thing. You don't understand that when you get into the world of man, that is the world that issues from here as opposed from man's gut, from his survival level, up here, requirements are the same things as rituals. Because down here is the only place that actually has requirements. Eat. Stay within a certain perimeters of weather, of temperature and humidity. That's the only thing. It's only from the level of consciousness down that you got requirements. Up here, you shouldn't even call them requirements. They're rituals. Now, people in the habit of saying requirement, people say, well, I couldn't live without books. And they say this seriously. I understand book lovers. There are people that say, I could not live if I couldn't go to the movies. I mean, if they priced it so much that I couldn't live. And you know it's silly. It's not a requirement. It's not a need they have. It's a ritual. The political party will get nowhere. Or the small party that's not going to get anywhere. Put it to you 2 or 3 ways. You can look at them either way you want to. They will have almost no rituals. It's just part and parcel. It's the same thing as my itinerant preacher having no rituals. A fraternal order of any kind, all these Masons, Moose, or things on campuses, or just a group of people that seem to have a common interest that is not either political or religious, that they are just interested in pigeon racing. And it ends up being a fraternal organization. Perhaps these men's organization, now women are coming into their own and having their own, but all these semi-secretive organizations that someone has to invite you to be a moose or an elk or a mason or a shriner and all that stuff. The ones that are the larger, like I guess the Masons here in Italy, if you don't know, at least you probably read or heard rumors, it's just replete with rituals. I mean, it's worse than Vacation Bible School in a Baptist community. Well, I mean, somebody has to invite you, and then you have to come on a certain night of the week at a certain time. You have to be there exactly on time. And you go through 4 or 5 stages. It takes you 2 or 3 years, and the membership committees have to interview you and vote on you, and they give you all kinds of little tasks, like you got to be in charge of meeting everybody at the door and taking their coat for a year, do humble stuff. You could be a banker. You could be a big shot in the community, but they will, in a sense, humble you or put you in humbling tasks. And then the final day that you're actually made a full-fledged Mason or whenever it comes, I mean, it's an all-night process by many reputes, and some versions of it is. It takes hours, and they blindfold you, and they try to frighten and threaten at least before they let you know it's metaphorical that they may slay you or do you bodily harm, and then they try to point out that what they're actually doing represents the death of Jesus or the rebirth of Israel after they left the land of captivity. And then they finally let it off, and there's all your brother Masons, everybody shakes your hand, they have a party. It is very deep in ritual. Same thing if you decide you want to start your own secret organization, especially, nobody will ever invite you to be a Mason. So finally you tried to worm your way into Moose, and they even wouldn't have you. And then you thought, well, maybe I'll become an AMVET. And when they heard your name and went, no way, you realize, wait a minute. Yeah. When you're turned down by the AMVETs, for the people that don't know, there was a good old story down south, but I'll tell you the truth, I made it up. But I made it up years ago, and now I've heard it since then. I can't resist, because I still like it. In the South, sometime prior to some of you people's age, by and large, the South was dry. There were even some states that were dry, but by and large, well, I shouldn't say dry, had very restrictive alcoholic control laws. Plus, there were several states up until this century, fairly recently, were actually dry. But at any rate, all sorts of laws. In Alabama, you could only buy booze between 9 and 3, and you could only do it 4 days a week. Just all sorts of things. But all the states were very restrictive when it came to Sunday. There was absolutely no such thing as Sunday alcohol sales. And since it's been rumored that certain people, not only in the South but throughout the world, especially men, like to imbibble, and some who do not attend church would in fact imbibble on Sunday where it was available, in spite of God's laws to the contrary, or at least the Baptist Church's law. Private clubs sprang up. But men, not being total idiots, you couldn't just build a little block house behind your house and call it the Sunday Drinking Club. Even some of the people that we know in Arkansas and Tennessee, even they weren't quite that slow. So, they picked out, knowing what they were doing, so I already pointed out to you the 3 main areas I could describe ritualistic behavior in humanity. Springing from here, it was religious, patriotic, and fraternal. They knew they couldn't open up like the Baptist Sunday Drinking Society. They knew they couldn't try to put on a facade of religion. What does almost everybody respect? Patriotism. So you suddenly had these groups. The American Legion, that was the first one, which I think actually started out as, you might say, a fairly legitimate organization for veterans to get together and lobby and have common interests. But in the South, once you got below the Mason-Dixie line, the American Legion became one thing. I mean, people would get together and apply to the national headquarters for a charter, but by then it had a national reputation, so they had a cover. South of that do line, or that don't do line, down south, American Legions became one thing, a front for drinking on Sunday and after hours. Then, as all success does, it spurred imitators. And so, before long, you had the VFW. They started that, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Same thing. And then finally you had, in rural areas of the South, the AMVETs, the American Veterans. All right, are you ready? American Legions, in case you never noticed, normally have fairly nice physical facilities, sometimes even equaling that of the moose and the elk. VFWs normally are perhaps an old American Legion post that they'd outgrown, and the VFW would buy it. They wouldn't keep it up quite as nice. And AMVETs always was a cinder block building, gravel, if anything, no pavement, and that was it, and a small neon, always gaudy for some reason, that said AMVET, and that's all it said. And it was usually pretty small. You had to know what you're looking for. Now to my story, my joke, which I have now heard back throughout the years that came around in a circle, and I've heard it now repeated, and once I heard it repeated as a fact. Well, I say a fact, you'll hear it. The guy didn't say it as a fact, but he did it like it was serious. He didn't see the humor. For some reason, I think I was staying in one of the aforesaid buildings of one of those organizations, and I pointed out, I suddenly turned to somebody and I instantly came up with this whole sequence of this whole hierarchy. Now I mentioned, have you noticed here, wherever I was, here in Alabama, just within 10 miles of each other, we have an American Legion, that such, and I went, yeah, and you got a VFW down here, and I went, yeah, and I said, you got an AMVETS over here, and I went, yeah. You know, all veterans, oh, yeah. And I said, you know how it came about? No. And so here's what the deal is, because it actually caters to a different level of people regarding the service to your country. Yeah, that's right. The American Legion, what you have to do to get in, you have to go there and you'll make application, but you have to have been a veteran, honorably discharged in one of the branches of the U.S. services. Okay, that's right. VFW, you just have to have been in the service at one time. AMVETs, you have to go there and swear that at least once in your life you were afraid they might draft you. I could make a metaphorical moral to all of that, but I'll leave it. No, I believe I will. No, I'll use that some other night. It's the same kind of stages of the intensity of their interest in matters spiritual or metaphysical. Go back to what we were talking about. There has to be rituals. The rituals will ultimately could be used over a long period of time of looking at it if you're looking at the organization as a public institution. If you're looking at the institution of not the individuals, it collectively, before the rituals overtook it to such a degree that the reason for which they were initially conceived has now been displaced. But in an individual case, a person might join up some political or religious or fraternal organization with a stated purpose. They say, our purpose is so-and-so, and he says, well, that's it. That's what I'm interested in. In the individual case, it may not take 100 years, 1,000 years. The displacement can come about very quickly that the rituals involved do displace the initial goal for which the rituals were initially intended to move one towards. The religious, they would worry about observing the rituals of the Ten Commandments, worry about remembering them, and observing them. Of course, you've got to remember to observe them. The patriots are concerned over the observing of the nation's birthday, perhaps the birthdays of its founding fathers, its first president, some of its famous war heroes. Fraternal organizations will likewise be concerned with observing, without any doubt, recognition, observing birthdays, hallmarks in the life of past people who had been involved with the fine sport of pigeon raising. The man who first discovered pigeons or invented pigeons, whichever it was. There will have to be rituals that you must meet at least 3 times a year at their monthly meetings to stay on the Pigeon Raising Association's roll book. There'll be times that you have to take the chair in their meetings. There'll be times that you must help them try and gain new members. But back to the intent of it. It may seem obvious at first, because I've hit on this in the past, but let's take religion again as being the most obvious and best described example, because it covers the most territory, not because it's deserving of criticism, but it is the easiest to describe. But I do want to stress fraternal is just sort of a catch-all to take up the slack. But you make a mistake, you don't see it at all if you don't see that patriotism is the same thing as religion, the way it's practiced. Because patriotism is one simple thing. The origins of it is the marking off of territory. But the rituals have nothing to do with it, other than the fact of what flows from the mind, because that was originally a part of man's survival instinct. But, and if you notice, it is always those of the more simplistic in their ritualistic approach to life who are the most patriotic. They don't ever seem to notice that, by the way. I can't resist pointing that out to you, since we're on that. Who is the most patriotic throughout the world? Cannon fodder. Is it going to do any good for me to tell the TV cameras that this is not criticism either? But it is the less sophisticated you are, is the more patriotic you are. And that doesn't mean, by God, don't any of you look funny at me. It doesn't mean that I don't love Greece as well as the rest of you. But the idea of patriotism being ritualistic, patriotism springs from one thing. It springs from a physical survival instinct. That's all it is. But then, as it must, it then flows into ritualistic behavior. And the more simplistic people are, and I mean literally, the more simplistic they are here, it is the lower classes, it is the people who are more simple in every country of this world who are the most patriotic. Now the leaders, of course, will speak patriotically. They'll run the rituals. They'll sign declarations of war. But in case you ever doubt, it's just one little litmus test if you need it. If you doubt the simplistic, the density, the constricted awareness of ordinary man, is that here it is on this planet, let us say that 90% of the people, or 95% of the people are extremely patriotic if asked, if nudged at all. Extremely patriotic. The 5 or 10% who apparently lead the external world, the leaders, are not patriotic worth a flea's breath, a tick on a flea on a flea. The higher up you go, now I'm just talking about not of any great understanding, not of any superior consciousness, but I'm talking about at the ordinary city level. The mayors, the presidents, the prime ministers, the bankers, those apparently in control of the external world. They have, compared to ordinary men, almost no sense of patriotism. Not as a ritual. They would fight to save their bank, maybe. They might take out machine guns if the hordes began to run the bank. Or they start storming the castle to overthrow the king, or storm the presidential palace, the prime minister's house. He'll shoot you in a dog's minute. He'll call out the army. Of course, then he'll say, well, it's to protect the sanctity of our great French nation. The hell it is. It's to save his ass. The Prime Minister of France is not patriotic about France. Not if he belongs in that position. If he's patriotic, he got there by a fluke. He won't be there next election. He probably won't make it through one meeting of Parliament. His party will go down. He is not patriotic, ritualistically. All of this is displacement. Religion has become so habitual, it has become now so part of the involvement in one's religion, that the rituals are now it. And if you ask somebody, they can still mouth words, well, I am attempting to become Christ-like. My striving is to become a real Jew with no quotation marks, no asterisks, or I am attempting to reach Buddhahood. Not just come here to service, but to actually reach the state of Buddha enlightenment. No, they're not. I don't mean that they didn't have the initial desire at one time, because I threw in for you to prepare you for this, that in one real sense, everyone is a kind of would-be mystical warrior who has any interest in improving themselves. And if you want to refine it, improve themselves in ways spiritual, that is non-physical. Not just improve their lot in life, not just improve their address to a better neighborhood, and not just to improve their looks by getting bigger muscles or a nose job, but people who sincerely want to improve themselves. It doesn't overtake their life, but what I'm trying to do is get you to realize that we're including almost all of humanity. Everyone who is sane, by their definition out there, would say that yes, they need improvement, and that they probably make some little effort now and then. They may consider the effort to be that they're sandal surfing and stop on a PBS station for 5 minutes rather than going to a sitcom. And I'm not just making fun of that, as silly as it sounds, that people will be sitting there going from one sports thing and doing this, and it gets to a story, it passes, they know where it is, the PBS station. And it's something about who knows what. It would be something about comparative religion, be something about maybe just a nature program, or something about science. And they'll flip past it and then go back. And they'll have certain thoughts will go through their mind like, I should pay more attention. I shouldn't just sit here and watch. And they'll flip back and sit there for 5 minutes and go into a daze, not know a thing was going on, but in the effort. I'm not making fun of it. It was an effort to improve themselves. In that sense, every ordinary person who wants to improve themselves, and remember we're talking about now almost all of sane humanity. They are, in a sense, a would-be mystical warrior. But then the punchline, or the last line of my news item was that simply shows, again, the need for extraordinary effort. Because the ordinary effort that people make amounts to very little more than to flip back and sit there and semi-hypnotize and watch PBS for 5 minutes between porno movies or sitcoms or westerns or whatever it is. Or it could be that they do go to church and they believe that that is an attempt to improve themselves. But all you do, what people end up doing at the ordinary level, is simply engaged in ritualistic behavior. What it does, and it's not psychological, that's not the intent, and it's not a conspiracy by people running religions. It is, since you cannot directly approach the goal, the original goal, let's take Christianity, and you can fill in, I've given you enough, to become Christ-like, to reach another state of consciousness. Since it is not possible for an ordinary person to do that, and men realize that, life knows it, ritualistic behavior, which initially, whatever it was first, I can just make it up and it doesn't matter, that they decided, well, the Old Testament is full of stories. The Jews trying to pay homage to the Creator. And you've got the same stories everywhere, the beginning, the Genesis, the opening chapters, and all religious scriptures throughout the world is somewhere that it starts off, verily, verily, we were a people lost on the plains, lost in the mountains, lost somewhere, wandering, and suddenly the voice of somebody spoke to us and says, you are my people, you have been selected, which is simply their nervous system got to the point that they had enough free time, their mind was now active enough that they began to talk to themselves. And they thought it was God. It was a voice of life saying, now you can settle down, quit killing each other all the time. Sometimes instead of killing your neighbor, talk to him. Tell him you want to kill him, but don't kill him. And sometimes ask your neighbor if he would, give you an extra shuck of corn over there before you take it away from him. Ask him just give it to you, and you'll pay him back someday. But it was like the voice of God. What it was saying was, be civilized, calm down, start thinking more. Start thinking more and doing less at the physical level, because there's now less to do now that you can think. Because now that you can think, you don't have to work 24 hours a day. You don't have to be peripatetic and move around, always planning and always having to kill off the crops or eat up all the food and then have to keep going. Use your noodle. Of course, it was his noodle talking. Well, it wasn't his noodle talking. It was his noodle had the speaker in the stereo. Somebody else was doing the talking. We won't go into that. But it went, settle down and use your head. But it was each man's head singing that, and he went, it never happened. He thought, what the hell is that? Now we got together and went, it's. Somebody thought, Yahweh, God, Zeus. What's the first thing they did after they recognized there's something else here besides us, folks? We're not here on this planet alone. Something else is going on. Do you hear it? And they all went, yeah. Well, it's here, but everybody went, do you hear it? And I went, yeah. And they go, that is spooky. We better placate whoever the hell that is. So the first thing they start doing is paying homage to it and want to be like it. But it's already displaced because they think I'm wanting to be like something out there, and what they want to be like is what their mind is telling them to do. And your mind is telling you, be more conscious. Pay attention. Have some control. Become aware of the fact that you're a conscious being. It is very difficult. Those of you that may have tried it, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I will admit to you, or I'll predict, it is extremely difficult to do. I keep forgetting to practice my facial gestures. Is that sneery and sarcastic enough? Extremely difficult to do. So how does it play itself out? You displace what was the original intent, that you wanted to be a better person. Not just a little bit better. You want to be more conscious, because that's the only betterment that any person can do. Anything else, anything less than being more conscious is playground betterment. There's nothing wrong. It's hobbies. It's ritualistic behavior. Because we all know this. No matter how rich you get, no matter how many nose jobs, facelifts, how much weight you lose, how many cars you have, it will not make you more conscious. Sorry. And that was the original intention. That is everyone's original intention because that's life's intention. And in case you hadn't noticed, regardless of the song, the version they got in Damn Yankees, the original version was, whatever life wants, life gets. Life wants to be more conscious. Life wants you to be more conscious. And everybody, every sane person on this planet wants to be more conscious. They do not know what to call it. Or if you told them what to call it, I could tell them real easily, and they go, well, hey, I like that. And I can say, right now, you could be a little more conscious. You can at least be conscious of the fact that you're conscious. And they do it, and they go, wow, that's weird. And then they're out of it. And you go, hey, if you can hold on to that a while, you know, wasn't that kind of a neat, kind of a little groovy hip feeling right then? And they went, yeah, it was weird. And you went, all right, try again. And you get them to do it maybe for 2 or 3 seconds. And then if you said, listen, there are reports that if you can stretch that out, I mean, like do it hours at a time, that it's exponentially the way it grows. It is so much fun, it's almost unbearable. And plus you'll understand all the questions, everything that annoys you in life, yeah, it goes away. Just gone. And I go, wow, that's worthwhile. But it's extremely, I must tell you the truth. Dear friends, it is extremely difficult to do. But now that the seed's already planted there, which is, I'm lying to put it that way, life is already doing it, but you displace it. That's what life wants everyone to be more conscious, and everyone understands very soon, without knowing it verbally, that it's almost impossible to do. You displace that original desire, and life allows it, of course. You displace it through ritualistic behavior. And the ultimate one, which I was going to get to, is thought. Consciousness wants to be more conscious, and since it finds it extremely difficult, it engages in a displacement of ritualistic behavior known as rambling thought. Speaking of tunes, again opposed to, in spite of the fact of how Nat King Cole got the words wrong, it's rambling mind. On our next show, we'll be talking about something else. But at least it won't give you the red ass. I mean the blues. The blues.